A very good evening to you. Welcome along to the Transfer Show. Premier League clubs have already spent well over £1 billion this summer and are on course to break their own spending record. But will it include Morgan Gibbs-White to Tottenham? Well, in the latest twist, Nottingham Forest are considering legal action over the approach. Mikel Arteta promised Arsenal fans a big summer, didn't he? No striker through the door just yet, but they've gone back to Chelsea and agreed to pay over £50 million for Noni Madueke. And Marcus Rashford tops a high-profile list of possible departures from Manchester United. Coming up, why his dream move to Barcelona is closer than ever. Yeah, Rashford might not be Barcelona's first choice, but you know who our first choices are when it comes to Sky Sports News and transfers? Mark McAdam and Dharmesh Sheth. Great to see you, gents. Mark, we have to start with Morgan Gibbs-White and that potential move to Tottenham. I came off set last night basically saying it's all on track, everything looks rosy. What's gone wrong?
What's gone right? It feels like for the last 24 hours for Tottenham Hotspur. Let's just clarify where we are as of last night, because that was the point, like you say, where things look good and this looked like this would be a smooth transaction from Nottingham Forest to Tottenham. Now, yesterday we said that Tottenham Hotspur had met the release clause, which we understand to be £60 million in Morgan Gibbs-White's contract. He was due to have his medical in London today. There were some reports suggesting he had travelled down to London, been given permission to do so because that release clause had been met. We know that he was a huge part of Nottingham Forest's successful season last year, where they finished 7th in the Premier League, 7 goals, 10 assists, huge part of Nuno's side. However, there's been a rather large spanner put into the works today, and it's all centring around this release clause.
What's gone wrong? What's happened?
Do you want to go? Shall I go? I'll tell you what, let's go to what our reporter Rob Dorset was saying earlier on today. Okay. And he was trying to give as much clarity as he possibly could with regards to this situation. So Nottingham Forest consider Morgan Gibbs-White's proposed move to Tottenham off for now. Sky Sports News has been told, whilst Forest consult their lawyers over potential legal action. Sky Sports News understands Forest have ceased all communication with Tottenham. Forest also believes Spurs made an illegal approach to the player and never granted permission for them to speak to him. Forest also believe there has been a breach in confidentiality around his release clause because Tottenham's bid was pitched at exactly the level of his release clause. It's not yet clear if Forest are able to block the transfer entirely. However, it is now expected to be delayed as Forest prepare a complaint to the Premier League. Forest have refused to comment to Sky Sports News, and Tottenham Hotspur also declined to comment when contacted.
OK. So
does that make it more clear for you?
Well, slightly, but I'm wondering one thing, Dharmesh, because football's a small world. Everyone talks, agents, players, coaches, everyone talks, whether it's on the record, off the record, and then sometimes they talk to us as journalists as well. How can you keep something like a release clause confidential?
Depends. Actually, it's a good question because there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to release clauses. I spoke to an agent earlier on today, and he tells me it all depends on how the release clause is worded in the contract. So it's basically an individual case-by-case basis. Now, if a release clause is confidential, let's just take that case first of all, then a club, if they wanted to buy a player, would have to approach another club to find out, A, if there is a release clause, and B, the value of that release clause. It can be the case that details of a release clause can be made available to an interested club via a representative if that was what was agreed when that contract was signed with the release clause incorporated within it. But if it is confidential, then there is still a club-to-club contact that would have to be made. Loosely speaking, like, it should work as easy as if there's a release clause and a club meets that release clause, then the player can go and talk to the club if he so wishes to go and talk to that club.
Which I thought was what happened.
But given the information that we've got today, this might imply that there might have been a confidential element to this release clause. Hence why Tottenham Hotspur would have had to have approached Nottingham Forest formally to look, we're interested in Morgan Gibbs-White. For example, I'm using this as the example. We'd be prepared to pay this much money. And it just so happens that the information that Rob Dorsett was giving us today was effectively Tottenham Hotspur pitching their bid at exactly that release clause level, which is why Nottingham Forest have thought this doesn't sound entirely right, because we feel that this is confidential information that can only be gleaned from a club if there is club-to-club contact.
Right.
Some release clauses are under an NDA. So that release clause exists, but no one is allowed to know it.
NDA meaning?
Non-disclosure agreement.
Yes.
And there are some release clauses like Michael Elise at Crystal Palace, £50 million, Dean Howson at Bournemouth, £50 million, Mateus Cunha that went to Manchester United, £62.5 million. That is a public release clause. People know that, the agent's allowed to discuss that. But there are some release clauses the agent is not allowed to tell anyone. And it feels like, reading between the lines, this is one of those situations where that detail in the contract is not allowed to be told. That's written, but not said.
OK.
And I think that's where Nottingham Forest's issue is.
And that's where they're disappointed with this approach. But I wonder whether we're just delaying the inevitable here, because, OK, I can understand Nottingham Forest are a little bit upset. Perhaps a confidentiality breach has taken place. But this move is going to happen anyway, Dharmesh?
It feels like it will happen, but there is going to be a delay now, clearly, because after yesterday's news, we were expecting this to accelerate pretty quickly. As you said, you came off air and was like, right, this deal's happening. But now we've got this situation where Nottingham Forest are not happy and they want some sort of... They want it looked into, how Tottenham Hotspur have approached this. It's very difficult in transfers in particular to keep... You mentioned it before, everybody talks to everybody else. So it's how certain bits of information has been transmitted to certain parties and whether it was done in good faith or whether it was done where it shouldn't have been done.
We've seen cases where teams perhaps have known what the trigger clause, the release clause is, when there necessarily hasn't been club-to-club contact, Mark, and so they've bid just a little bit higher to prove that they didn't know what the release clause was.
The famous one was Arsenal and Luis Suarez at Liverpool.
Yeah.
We understand it was anything over 40 million would have triggered the opportunity for the player to speak to the club, and Arsene Wenger very famously bid £40 million and £1, which was the release clause. So they were entitled to speak to the player. It never ended up happening. But yeah, and sometimes you have release clauses. For example, Neymar Jr., when he went from Barcelona to PSG, that had to be paid in full. So it was a cheque for €220 million on the table from PSG to La Liga. We are paying your release clause. Other release clauses, as Dharmesh alluded to, they can be unique to that particular deal. It could be 3 payments over 18 months of X, 3 equal payments. Every release clause is ever so slightly different. And it's one of those situations we try and gather as much information, but ultimately the club can do nothing if that is contractually written between the two parties. If you pay X, Y and Z in these kind of payments, in this kind of timescale, there's nothing we can do about it.
That's the case with Mateus Cunha. So Manchester United knew it was £62.5 million, but the conditions of that release clause were they pay a third of it immediately, they pay a third of it next summer, and the summer after that, they complete that £62.5 million payment over 3 instalments. Now, you said before, sometimes clubs go above the release clause. And people will say, why would you pay above the release clause? Well, sometimes clubs will try and say, you know what, we're willing to pay you, say it was £62.5 million for Cunha. I was told at the time that Manchester United were not only exploring the deal as the conditions set out that Wolves had, but they were also exploring potentially paying above £62.5 million in exchange for more favourable payment terms. Because in this world of PSR, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit more later in the show, you have that situation where the £62.5 million won't come out of Manchester United's account straight away. It will be the first instalment. So if they can spread a slightly higher payment over, say, 4 instalments, then that 20 odd million pounds that they're paying at the moment, that would be reduced per year, and that would help them per financial year in their PSR calculation.
I bet you all didn't know that you were going to become experts in
I'm finally using my
contract
economics degree.
releases.
I did an economics degree, finally using it.
There you go.
Yeah.
My brain is whirring. OK, that's all as it is. There's nothing we can do about that. We have to wait for the legal process to play out. But what does this mean in terms of Spurs now? So they want their player as soon as possible. They've got a pre-season tour to go on.
They might just have to be patient. Like Dharmesh said, you get the feeling this will happen. However, they may just have to wait a little bit longer to just clear up things legally and make sure they're in a comfortable position, because the last thing they want to do is be dragged through the courts throughout the course of the next few weeks and months and so on and so forth. They don't want to make it uncomfortable for the player. They just want to get the players in the building, focus on this brand new era at Tottenham Hotspur with Thomas Frank, who's an exceptional coach. I'm really excited to watch his new look Tottenham team, which obviously he wanted Morgan Gibbs-White to be a part of. So it'll be fascinating to see how it develops. But ultimately, it's out of everyone's hands, apart from the key 2 or 3 people at the table, and there'll be a lot of lawyers involved as well at this moment.
A lot of lawyers charging a lot of money to thrash this one out, I'm sure. But it's one that we will keep an eye on here, and I know Mark and Dharmesh will be across it. But moving on now to a player who has been granted a move this transfer window, Noni Madueke. Dharmesh, how close now is he to becoming an Arsenal player? Because we saw him just a few days ago training with Chelsea.
This is close. This is closer than close.
Gloria Gaynor?
No.
Oh.
Closer than you ever can imagine. It's close, though.
Should we sing it for him?
Rosie Gaines.
Rosie Gaines.
Yeah.
Gloria Gaynor,
I was
Rosie
so
Gaines.
close. Not even old enough to know that kind of stuff.
Oh, all right, Mark.
Gloria
That's
Gaynor.
a low blow.
Gloria Gaynor, listen, you'll survive, don't worry. Oh, there's another one. Anyway, Noni Madueke. He has been given permission to leave Chelsea's camp at the FIFA Club World Cup to pursue this deal with Arsenal. He's expected to have a medical with Arsenal very, very soon. I'll break down the deal for you. It has all been agreed. It's an initial payment of £48.5 million plus a further £3.5 million in performance-related add-ons. So in total, if he was to meet all of those performance-related conditions, the total cost of that deal could rise to £52 million. And he's already agreed in principle the terms on a 5-year contract with Arsenal. So this one is looking really, really close now. It looks like Madueke is going to be on his way back from the United States, back to the UK, to take a medical with Arsenal. And we should see a formal announcement, all being well, in the next few days or so.
Arsenal fans jumping with glee at this one, Mark?
I think this is a really exciting signing. 23 years old, offers that versatility that Mikel Arteta likes from every signing, someone that can play in multiple positions. Dharmesh mentioned earlier on that having someone who could play as a right winger, and Arsenal perhaps lacked that bite and that spark when Bukayo Saka was injured last season, and Noni Madueke will certainly bring that. Just the 2 starts in the Club World Cup for Chelsea maybe was a little indication that he wasn't a part of the furniture moving forward. And when you look at the fee as well, it's very much in keeping with the other players that have moved over the course of this summer. It's all around £50 million, isn't it? You know, João Pedro, 55 plus 5 from Brighton to Chelsea. Jamie Gittings around 50 million as well from Borussia Dortmund. Anthony Elanga, when that one gets confirmed, from Nottingham Forest to Newcastle.
Yeah, the fees are also similar here, aren't they?
Yeah, 52 plus 3. So what you're seeing there is that's the market value for young players, young wingers that can be quite versatile in that front 3. And anyone under the age of 25, between 20 and 25, that's the kind of price you're going to be paying. So that's one of the things why clubs like to get business done nice and early, that if that bar is set a lot higher than perhaps they're comfortable with, they're not caught in that mould of being, well, we've got to pay that because that's what he's worth, because that's what he went for. And that's why you see some teams get their business done nice and early. But looks like a really sensible piece of business for Arsenal, and I think he could be another one of those players.
This is what clubs are starting to do, though, because they are looking at the market value of certain players in that same position like Madueke. And Chelsea will have every right to say, well, if this player is going for this much money, then this is how we should value Noni Madueke at. It's the same with the whole Manchester United and Bryan Mbeumo, because Brentford are probably thinking they bought Mateus Cunha for £62.5 million. So I think that's where we're going to start pitching what we want for Brian and Mbumo. But with regard to Madueke himself, make no mistake about it, this is not something Arsenal just thought about in this transfer window. They've kept an eye on his development now for the past couple of years in Madueke. Clearly, they've pinpointed areas in this transfer window where they need to strengthen. And I mean, Mark alluded to it there. Something that happened last season when they had all of these injuries, and maybe they thought when Saka was injured, yes, they had Ethan Nwaneri, but he was just coming into the team. Did they have anyone else who could go into that position who had Premier League experience previously and who could keep Arsenal at relatively a good level as maybe Saka was keeping him at? But now that they're looking at all of these other players and filling in the number 2 goalkeeper position, they've got their 2 midfielders in Norgard and Martin Zubimendi following the departures of Jorginho and Thomas Partey. They're starting to look at all of their squad and thinking, right, we've found out where the holes are, let's fill them. And if you look at their squad strength now, Madueke, as Mark said there, can play on both wings. Add that to Gabriel Martinelli, Leandro Trossard, Bukayo Saka, Ethan Nwaneri, and you're starting to look at real strength in depth in those positions for Arsenal. Reece Nelson as well, he's still an Arsenal player.
How good of a move, though, is this for Madueke? Is he going to be going from a fringe player at Chelsea to a fringe player at Arsenal? Is he not a starter? Is that what we're saying?
No, I mean, he's going to have to fight for his place. I think Arsenal want to increase competition in every single area of that pitch. And because of his versatility, it won't just be a case of, oh, if Bukayo Saka's injured, then Noni Madueke is going to get a game, because he can play on the left-hand side as well. He's shown he's versatile. And another thing that he's shown is that he always seems to be fit and available for Chelsea. And he's been a regular for them. And he's won trophies with Chelsea as well. So I think I think there was a little bit of pushback on social media, depending on whether that's a good gauge or not, from some Arsenal fans thinking, is this a good signing or not? He's an England international.
What would you say to the Arsenal fans?
Listen, I think Mark said it all there, but the qualities of Noni Madueke, I think it is a good signing, if and when it does happen, and it will increase competition for Arsenal in those forward positions.
Yeah, and that's something that Arsenal definitely need, considering all the injuries that they had last season. OK, after the break, we've got more to discuss at the Gunners, actually, including what's happening with Victor Yokareesh. We get the view from Portugal next, and we ask if Manchester United fans should be getting slightly concerned. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Now, we spoke earlier about Arsenal's pursuit of Noni Madueke, didn't we? They also want Victor Yokareesh. Well, we spoke to Portuguese football journalist David Novo earlier, and he brought us up to date with the striker's position with Sporting.
Sporting is not really happy with this situation. Of course, the way the player is behaving, the way the agents are behaving, and that's the problem. So if Gyökeres doesn't show up in the next couple of days, I think that, of course, maybe he can face a fine, some disciplinary punishment, for example. We don't know that. I think not even Sporting knows that by now. But of course, in terms of the player's point of view, of course, I think he's going to do everything to push for the transfer. We just don't know how not showing up for training can help the deal. That's the big question mark here in Portugal. What the player is expecting by not showing up. If he's expecting the Sporting to agree the deal, I don't think that things are going to be done that way. To be honest.
Well, it sounds like Yokareesh could be AWOL here, Mark. I mean, this sounds kind of unprecedented. Is this the right thing to do for Yokareesh?
Unprecedented, probably not. How many times have we spoke about players wanting potential moves, agitating for potential moves, some operating in a different way? The fact that Victor Yokareesh is potentially not turning up for training when he should be, there are two things at play there. A, he's liable potentially to a fine, which may be a couple of weeks' wages, so he might be quite costly in that respect. But also, for him to take that action, you'd probably read between the lines and say he must feel that he has been treated unfairly by the club. There has been an agreement in place that's not being honoured. He's not being respected in the right way. He's had conversations with the president, with the owners, with people at the top of the tree, and he obviously feels that this is the action he needs to take to force through the move, to facilitate the venture to Arsenal, to also make quite clear his feelings on the situation. And you don't know how things will play out. Ultimately, it's a bit of a game of chess here, or a bit of a game of poker. You know, do you want to play hardball with the owners, the people that ultimately hold the cards, or do you want to go softly and just try and get things over the line? I can't help but feel this is a bit of a nasty situation that isn't ideal for anyone involved, and how it will end up, we don't quite know. You'd imagine it will be an Arsenal transfer, but there may be a few stumbling blocks in the road, and as Damesh so often says to me, you know, transfers are never that easy. You know, it's never straightforward. It's never simple. And this is one of those, it feels like it's going to get a little bit nasty between now and completion. I
got the impression, Damesh, that because Sporting gave Yokareesh allowed him to delay his return to training for pre-season, that they knew he was leaving and this was all on the cards. But, I mean, now does the deal get done? Are they retracting that? Do they want him to stay?
It feels like the direction of travel is still that the deal is going to get done. But as Mark said there, it's a bit of a rocky road to get there because it has been a little bit unsavoury in the last couple of months. It's got that way simply because, as Mark alluded to there, the feeling that Gyökeres might have had of a gentleman's agreement, shall we say, that if he stayed last season, then he could leave for a certain amount of money this time, which was believed to be a tad less than £60 million. Whereas when the Sporting president has been interviewed about it, he's been very, very pointed in saying he will not be leaving for that amount in this transfer window. So then you're thinking, did this gentleman's agreement exist? Is there anything such as a gentleman's agreement in today's football? Maybe yes, maybe no. But it still feels, because they gave him that extra time off, because he's still in that position where he doesn't really want to return, it can only really be resolved in one way, you would think, and that would be ending up that transfer to Arsenal. Arsenal will probably look at this and say, in one way, it's working in our favour because we want the player. Sporting probably don't want the player anymore, and Gyökeres wants to go to Arsenal. So when all those three elements come together, it usually ends up with one outcome and the player getting the move that he wants. But Sporting clearly will say yes at some point, but as much on their terms as they possibly can.
All these clubs just kind of posturing and sticking their chest out.
But it's millions of pounds at stake. And so many fans sit there on social media and say, just pay the extra 5 million, pay the extra 10 million. But ultimately, these clubs can't just keep doing that with every single deal. They have to be sensible, they have to be wise, they have to look at the finances, and obviously, you know, PSR is a huge factor in the game now. So it's quite flippant to say just give them the extra 5 million. But ultimately, these clubs have to run in the best way possible and be as sustainable as possible, and that means they have to watch the pennies.
Yeah, and for a player like Yokareesh that hit 54 goals in 52 competitions last season, you can understand why he's wanted. Are Arsenal the only ones that want him, though?
I mean, I don't know whether that matters now, because he's made it clear that the only club that he wants is Arsenal.
That's all he's got in his mind.
So that's all he's got in his mind now. I mean, Manchester United, there was a lot of interest earlier on in the window, but that was clear because of that link that Ruben Amorim has with Sporting. He played fantastic football under Ruben Amorim at Sporting as well. And there was talk of a couple of other clubs who were interested in Victor Yokareesh, but it's emerged now that Arsenal seem to be the one club that are totally pursuing this deal, who've held talks with both the player and the club, and that the player, his mind is made up. He wants Arsenal.
So do Arsenal have the space then? I mean, because Sporting want more. Arsenal haven't paid it as of yet. Arsenal, do they have the ability to pay more when, as Mark says, every club is thinking about PSR?
It's a good question, actually. But if you go back 2 summers ago, Arsenal went pretty big in the transfer window, notably spending, I think it was £105 million on Declan Rice. Last summer, I think they kept quite a watchful eye on their PSR. And if you look at their business last summer, their 2 big signings were Mikel Merino and Ricardo Calafiori. They came in for a combined £75 million. And those 2 players in themselves were £30 million less than what they paid for one player the previous summer in Declan Rice. But because they were a little bit more cautious in last summer's transfer window, it put them in a really good place with regard to PSR heading into this summer's transfer window. Clearly they aren't finished, because we know they still want to do Victor Yokareesh. We know that Ebere Eze is a prime target of theirs. Christian Mosquera, the centre defender from Valencia, they're trying to do a good deal with him as well. They feel they can get a good deal done there because he's only got a year left on his contract. I think Valencia want in the region of £25 million. Arsenal don't want to pay that much. Maybe they can meet in the middle and then Arsenal can get some money off there. So to do all of those 3 deals, as well as the Madueke deal, we're talking in excess of £150 to £200 million still.
And that's possible for Arsenal?
That Arsenal want to spend. It is possible, but Arsenal, like other clubs in their position, will have to be creative as well in the transfer market. Not only with the players that they buy, because they will try and do it in such a way whereby, right, let's try and load some performance-related add-ons in this fee, or let's try and make this an instalment payment maybe over 4 years rather than 3 years. They just need to be a little bit more creative. But also, and they will be creative, by the way, but also it's from a financial and a squad perspective as well. Financially, clearly, for the reasons I've just said, but from the squad perspective, there are going to be players who are in that Arsenal squad at the moment who are seeing all of these players coming in and maybe in their positions and thinking, I'm not going to get the game time that I want. So there will likely be sales at Arsenal at some point in the summer transfer window as well.
So they recoup some of that money. And you mentioned Ebere Eze. I'm interested to know, like, particularly now that Palace have been demoted from the Europa League to the Europa Conference, is Eze going to become an Arsenal player? He wants Champions League football, surely?
Yeah, I don't think that the Palace situation will have changed his mind about whether he would want to go to Arsenal or not. All the information that we have is that he is open to that move. Personal terms probably aren't going to be a problem with regard to Arsenal and Ebere Eze. But what he does have, and what we talked about at the top of the show, is those famous 2 words now in this show, release clause. And that is a £60 million release clause plus £8 million in performance-related add-ons. So in total, that deal potentially could be worth £68 million. Now, Crystal Palace are under no pressure to sell Ebere Eze, but they do know that if a club comes in and meets that release clause and Eze wants to talk to that club, he is free to do just that. Maybe Arsenal are exploring the possibility internally of meeting that release clause, but also what I mentioned before, shall we try and offer a little bit more in return for favourable payment terms? So all of these approaches will be going through Arsenal's mind when it comes to trying to sign someone like Ebere. But make no mistake about it, he is one of their priority targets in this transfer window, and we believe he's open to the move.
Okay.
And just while we're talking about Crystal Palace, huge news obviously with them being kicked out of the Europa League. Kave Solokol has been speaking to Steve Parish about this, and there is an exclusive interview coming up on Sky Sports News about all of his thoughts and feelings on this situation. So it's well worth tuning in from 8 o'clock to get Steve Parish on this very, very difficult situation that's going on at the moment.
Of course, and no doubt very disappointed, Steve Parish and Crystal Palace as a club. Damish, I think I know what your mastermind subject would be now.
Not release clauses.
Release clauses, definitely release clauses.
What's your release clause?
It's too.
That one is a confidential one. So you would have to approach certain
With caution.
people here at Sky Sports News to find that out.
You signed an
We'll
NDA.
find out.
Oh, imagine. Let's get back to a player that's we all known and we've watched for years in the Premier League, making a return after leaving Liverpool in 2023. Jordan Henderson, is he back?
Very close to being back, actually. He is set to sign for Brentford, which is a real coup for Brentford. The former Liverpool captain is expected to sign a 2-year deal. The move, we think, is going to be finalised over the weekend with a formal announcement to follow. He's a free agent, remember, because he had a 2-year contract with Ajax, but after the first year, it was an option to trigger the second-year option. Now, he decided not to trigger that second-year option, became a free agent, and I think he wanted to return to the UK. There is a feeling he is still got ambitions to play in the World Cup. Now, he has returned to the England fold under Thomas Tuchel. Playing for Brentford, he wants to give himself the best possible chance of staying there ahead of the World Cup next summer.
Still got life in those legs at 35, Mark?
Absolutely. I think experience. When you look at what's happened to Brentford over the course of this summer, they've obviously lost key players. They've lost Thomas Frank. They've lost a lot of the backroom team as well. So to bring in someone with that experience, knowledge and know-how is going to be absolutely instrumental for Keith Andrews. He's a real leader, and I think that's the one thing that perhaps Liverpool realised when he left the football club, is he was such a powerful and important voice in the dressing room, off the pitch, and was a real driver for the right culture. And I think that's the perfect scenario for Brentford, that he'll bring that into that group that's already a really good group. But yeah, I'm excited to see him back in the Premier League, and I bet he can't wait to get there as well.
Yeah, a similar move for a man called Kyle Walker as well. And interesting hearing you speak about Henderson, because Scott Parker at Burnley was saying the exact same thing about Kyle Walker, about him being a leader in the dressing room and what he can bring both on and off the pitch. Another player as well, hoping to make it to the World Cup next summer with England. OK, still plenty more to come on this transfer show, including done deals for Crystal Palace and Nottingham Forest. Plus, this was meant to be the window for Ruben Amorim to overhaul the Manchester United squad, wasn't it? Well, is it going to plan? Stay with us. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Damesh and Mark still alongside me, and we're going to talk about a player now who I'm sure will have his eye on the World Cup next summer. It's, of course, Marcus Rashford, who, at our time of speaking, is technically a Manchester United player, but he's been given that time away to try and find himself another club, Mark. Are we any closer to finding out where that might be? Will it be United? Could it be somewhere in Spain?
Yeah, it's interesting because we were speaking on the Transfer Show a couple of weeks ago about an interview that Marcus Rashford done with Spanish YouTubers called X-Buyer. Oh, you can see it there. They had millions and millions of followers. They've got relationships with people at Barcelona. They've spoken to high-profile Barcelona players. And in this interview here, he's saying, basically, yeah, I'd love to play with Lamine Yamal. Who wouldn't? And yeah, one day I'd love to play with, you know, those stars at Barcelona. And they kind of said, could it happen? Will it happen? And his response was, hopefully. He made it very clear that he wanted to play Champions League football, so that left very few options in the Premier League. And of course, Barcelona is always a club that he's admired, respected and wanted to be associated with. And it almost feels like now, back then when he says, oh, I want to play for Barcelona, you go, well, you know, they've got other targets and they're probably going to go and get them. Yes, you're on their list. We know that Deco has said he likes Marcus Rashford. However, there were other players you felt that would be number one, number two. But now things have fallen almost into place. We know that Nico Williams has signed that bumper contract at Athletic Club. He's going nowhere until 2035 as things stand. And we know that Liverpool have rebuffed any interest in Luis Diaz. So therefore, it leaves Marcus Rashford, who feels like now the number one target for Barcelona. We know that they have to be very creative and clever financially. Our colleagues Sky in Italy have said that Barcelona are prepared to go all in to get Marcus Rashford. In terms of his personal situation, very similar to some of the other players, he's been given more time to rest whilst this gets sorted out. However, he has opted to say, no, I need to be ready for the new season. He is at Carrington. He is training in his own training regime. I think the biggest stumbling block here is going to be the wages he's on and what Barcelona can afford to pay Manchester United, and whether Manchester United are prepared to pay a healthy chunk of what he's currently on, which is rumoured to be around £300,000 to £350,000 a week. So you get the feeling it's a deal that's edging closer and looks more likely than it did a couple of weeks ago. But I think the finances at play here may make this one a tricky one to get done quickly. Yeah,
you mentioned his training, and he obviously released that video earlier today of him pushing the weights and looking fit and athletic. Is that just an innocent post, or is that him sending out a message to potential clubs?
I think it's you know, younger generation like to put things on social media all the time, whatever they're doing. Look at me, I'm eating a roast dinner, or look at me, I'm training really hard and I'm ready for the new season, or here I am at Beyonce. It's just a part of the culture for young people these days. But it's certainly a message, isn't it? You know, I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm ready to go. I'm in good, fit, lean shape. And if you want me, come and get me.
Okay. Come and get me play. We've seen that before from many a player. Damesh, 5 weeks to go until the Premier League gets back up and running again. It's coming round quick. Where is this squad overhaul that we expected from Ruben Amorim and United?
I did enjoy your post about you at Beyonce, by the way. Good.
I deleted it, so it's not there anymore.
Was you wearing glitter?
Definitely.
Brilliant.
Where is this going?
Brilliant.
Right, so...
This is what the fans want.
Listen, this squad overhaul that you alluded to there, I think going into this transfer window, and for the majority of last season when things were going wrong at Manchester United, it was accepted that this is not a one-window fix. Right. Manchester United are not going to panic. They are disciplined in how they are approaching this transfer window. They've got in Matheus Cunha, and they knew what they had to do to get him, which we explained before. They had to meet the conditions that Wolves had and the fee, so they did that. There's no release clause with Bryan Mbeumo, so they're trying to negotiate a price that is as much as on their terms as it is on Brentford's terms. Now, we do know that the last bid, worth £62.5 million, which included performance-related add-ons, was rejected by Brentford. That was the second bid that was rejected. Now, United will still go back in. We expect them to go back in, and I think there's still a cautious optimism that this deal can get over the line. But they know that Brentford want closer to £65 million, and they want the majority, if not all of that £65 million, to be a guaranteed payment. So that's where the negotiation will happen between Manchester United and Brentford. Can they have a halfway point where they can meet because they know that Brian Mbeumo wants to go to Manchester United? So we do know that those are the two primary targets for this transfer window before they focused on what they could do with regard to sales. And we've been talking about it for the past week, those 5 players, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Alejandro Garnacho, Anthony, Tyrell Malacia, all given extra time before they return to the training ground, even though Marcus Rashford has come back a little bit earlier, to find out a solution for their future. Now, if Manchester United can get their way and they get these players sold on a permanent deal, they can then generate money to maybe fund other areas of the squad that they want to do in this transfer window. So it's not a case of, right, this one transfer window, get rid of 10 players we don't want and bring in 8 players that we do want. It's almost impossible to be able to do that in one window. So United are going to do this in a way where they bring in the players that they want and avoid making those mistakes that they've made in the past, because they've had players who have arrived at the club who haven't had Premier League experience and it hasn't worked. This time they're going for Cunha, hardened in the Premier League. Brian Mbeumo, big experience in the Premier League as well. So you can see the kind of the direction that they want to go in and make sure that the recruitment is right this time, because it's so important to do it right this time.
OK, Manchester United fans, you hear that? Patience is the key word. OK, we're going to take a break, but just a reminder that we have an exclusive interview with Crystal Palace chairman Steve Parish following UEFA's decision to demote them from the Europa League to the Europa Conference League. That's following us at 8 o'clock tonight. Don't miss it. Coming up at 8 o'clock here on Sky Sports News, an exclusive interview with Crystal Palace chair Steve Parish, who labels UEFA's decision to demote Palace to the Conference League as ludicrous. Stay with us for that. OK, before that, though, we're going to stick with transfers, and Mark and Darmish are still here. Mark, Bournemouth, after another Chelsea goalkeeper.
Yep, and they've got their man. Deal agreed. This has been confirmed in the last few hours here on Sky Sports News. It's understood the fee for the Serbia international was going to be £25 million. He spent last season on loan at Strasbourg, was one of the best goalkeepers in Ligue 1, very highly rated at Chelsea, but obviously they have a number of players in that position, so looking to recoup some money. They paid £14 million for him in the summer of 2023 from MLS side New England Revolution. Total package worth around £25 million. Going to have his medical next week, and he will sign a 5-year contract.
We've spoken about Nottingham Forest already, and we know about Gibbs-White and that deal being done, not being done with the lawyers. But there is definitely an incoming at Nottingham Forest now. Yeah,
this one's been confirmed by the club this afternoon as well. Jair Cunha from Botafogo. He signed a 5-year contract. He's a young 20-year-old centre-back, can play left or right side, and Nuno has a new defender.
Darmish, this is a big name. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Out of contract, is he, with the Saudi club that he was playing for? And is he returning to an old club?
Not quite, but Olympique Marseille are in talks with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang over what would be a sensational return to that French team. He left Marseille, of course, for the Saudi Pro League club Al Qadisiyah last summer in a season for Marseille where he scored 30 goals in 43 starts. For Al Qadisiyah, he scored 21 goals in 36 games, and he's now currently in the final stages of arranging a mutual termination of his contract. A number of Saudi clubs are speaking to Aubameyang and his representatives as well, and it's understood early talks have begun with 2 Premier League clubs as well. But Olympique Marseille in talks with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for a return.
OK. Burnley, what can you tell me about them, Darmish? They've agreed a deal to sign a forward after bringing in Kyle Walker.
Yep, Jakob Brun-Larsen from Stuttgart for an undisclosed fee. He signed a 4-year deal with Burnley. He spent a season on loan at Burnley, actually, the season before last, when they were last in the Premier League. Scored 6 goals in 16 starts. We're expecting a formal announcement on that one soon. OK, and one more before we go. Noni Madueke, Victor Yokareesh, Ebere. Will Arsenal get 1, 2, maybe even all 3 of those signings? What do we think?
I think they'll get all of them.
OK.
I think they'll get all of them. I think the noises coming out of the Eze camp was obviously, again, it's a release clause, so there's not a lot Crystal Palace can do, and Arsenal very keen. Darmish actually said on the show last week that, you know, it wasn't just one winger and one striker. It was actually potentially a winger, a 10 and a striker. They were open to really revamping that front 3. So I think they'll get all 3 of them, and I think Arsenal could be a real force next season.
Madueke one is close now. We said it earlier that he's been given permission by Chelsea to leave their camp at the FIFA Club World Cup. A deal has been agreed with Arsenal. It's £48.5 million initial payment, £3.5 million performance-related add-ons. He's agreed in principle the terms of a 5-year contract, and we expect him to have his medical in the next few days or so, with a formal announcement to follow that Madueke is indeed going to be an Arsenal player.
Arsenal fans will be very excited by this, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we've seen a lot of activity for Arsenal in the transfer market over the course of the last 4 or 5 summers. You get the feeling that if they get those players, they will have no excuses to not go on and be the force that they've been building over the last few years.
Wow, what an opportunity for Arsenal to challenge for that Premier League title next season. The transfer show is back on Sunday. Darmish will be there. You can meet him there at 7 o'clock here on Sky Sports News. Coming up at 8, we have an exclusive interview with the Crystal Palace chair, Steve Parish. He's labelled UEFA's decision to demote Crystal Palace from the Europa League to the Conference League as ludicrous. Much more on that to come. A very emotional interview with Steve Parish. An exclusive for us here at Sky Sports News. Stay with us for that.